But his uncle opened his left eye just a slit as he approached and said, "You've got dust around your boot seals." Janus looked down and felt his heart sink. The surface outside the dome had spent billions of years getting bombarded by the sun and broken down into particulates so fine they got into everything, even the seals of a hard suit. It wasn't a problem if you cleaned them out, but if you tried to seal the suit with fines, or worse, ultrafines, particles even smaller than dust, in the locks, you were asking for a breach. "It's fine," his uncle said, getting out of the chair, holding the mug like it was gyrostabilized. "Swap to a different set. I'll wash them while you're at work." "You don't need to do that." "Don't I?" his uncle said, leaning against the kitchen counter, eyes boring holes into Janus. "Hurry now. You'll be late." "Yes, uncle," Janus said. He walked back to the room he shared with his sister Callie and found her sitting on the edge of the lower bunk, goggles on, hands waving like a band conductor for an orchestra. Only she could see. With most kids, Janus would have assumed she was playing a game with her friends. Not Callie. She'd been a quiet child and grown into an overly serious teenager and a top-tier student who'd been moved into Prime Dome's best academic program on merit alone. She's going to be so much more accomplished than her uncle and big brother. It broke his heart and made him proud enough to burst at the same time. He waved a hand in front of her face to make sure she was fully immersed before tickling her mercilessly. She squealed as she ripped off her goggles, and Janus laughed. "Janus, I hate when you do that. I'm going to kick you in the shins next time you try to get me." "Is that any way you talk to your favorite big brother?" "Fine, I'm going to kick you in the nuts." Janus grinned and ruffled her hair. "That's my girl. You have breakfast?" "Don't have time. Important project. People counting on me." She went to put her goggles back on, but Janus grabbed them out of her hands. "Beat it, squirt, unless you want to watch me change." "Gross," she said, grabbing her goggles back and stuffing them into her bag. "Also, you can't work hard on an empty stomach." She stuck her tongue out at him and closed the door behind her. Janus pulled a clean set of coveralls from his storage locker and carefully took off and bagged the dirty ones. Once he was dressed, he made sure he brushed off the legs of the new coveralls and his boots, then headed back to the main room. "What's the new project?" Yvonne asked Callie. "I can't talk about it," Callie said, around a mouthful of rehydrated mush. "Why not?" their uncle asked. "It's confidential," Callie said with the seriousness of a tenured professor instead of a 14-year-old kid. Janus set the bag coveralls in his uncle's chair and accepted a second bowl of mush from his uncle's hand. "Thank you." His uncle slapped him in the arm, although it was hard to tell if the gesture was meant to be reassuring, challenging, or forgiving by the craggy expression on the man's face. "Do you know what your sister's working on?" "I'm probably not smart enough to understand it, even if I did," Janus joked. Callie frowned. She never liked it when he talked himself down. "Heard you had a run-in with the lead candidate and his second," his uncle said, taking a drink from his mug. "What?" Callie asked. "It was nothing," Janus mumbled, eating a spoonful of mush. "Aspirant candidates have a lot of pull right before the trials," his uncle said. "Some might say more than they deserve." It was Lyra, wasn't it? Callie said, with a teenage girl's undisguised venom. She'll be leaving for the trial soon anyway, Janus said. Maybe she won't, Callie said with a sneer. Maybe she'll make a mistake and die, and someone better, Callie? Janus snapped. And someone better will take her place, Callie said, unashamed. Being an aspirant is supposed to be about being careful, fixing things, and doing what's best for the dome. You should have applied. Janus bit his lower lip and set his bowl down. He wiped his hands. The trials aren't for people like us, Bug. His uncle looked like he might have something to say about that. But Janus cut him off before he could speak. You going to work a shift today? His uncle crossed his arms and leaned back. Didn't think so, Janus thought. Then he felt bad. His uncle had saved them, pulled them out of Promethean base, and managed to get 2 kids across the open dust on foot. But either the trip or the ghosts of his sister, his brother-in-law, and the friends he left behind had broken him. It was the paradox of Janus's vanished child. His uncle had taught him so many small practical things he used to do his job and stay alive. But his uncle was also the reason Janus worked 2 shifts. Nothing escaped Ivan's notice, except the way he was slowly drinking himself to death and losing his nephew's respect. Come on, Bug. Grab your things. We're going to be late. Janus took Callie as far as the Sector 6 border before giving the kid a hug under protest and letting her go. It spoke to Callie's unheard of aptitude scores that she was allowed to move between dome sectors to go to school. It spoke to their family's status as pariahs that they weren't allowed to live in Sector 1, where her program was, and where Thukram was, and where the other prodigies' families lived. That's fine, Bug, Janus thought, watching her pass through the checkpoint. Prometheans don't climb mountains to hobnob and live easy. We climb to steal fire from the gods. Callie turned back at the last moment and waved at him, and Janus broke out into a smile as wide as the sky. Doing 2 shifts and swallowing a little abuse meant his kid's sister wouldn't have to, and he'd take that deal any day. With his sister on her way, he hurried to make it to his job at the recycling plant. The streets and walkways were emptying out, and the dome had gone full dark as the sun rose, signaling the start of the day's battle against heat buildup. The temperature had already climbed past 20 degrees C. It would be closer to 30 degrees C by midday, and Janus was grateful to duck inside the somewhat cooler interior of the plant when he arrived 10 minutes later. I clocked you in, Barry Medina, the plant manager said without looking up from his book. Thanks. Anything pressing? Why? Janus asked, grabbing a handheld terminal. Sorter on line 3 is kicking more rejects. I think it's the lenses. How much more? 2%, Barry said, looking up from his reading. I'll check, Janus said, and headed out into the plant proper to do his job. Unlike Janus's early shift supervisor, Barry didn't care about quotas, because his responsibility was the overall productivity of Recycling Plant 6, and only Recycling Plant 6. When Janus first started working there, it hadn't taken very long to notice the machines Janus worked on broke less often, and the plant manager had summoned the freshly graduated mechanic to his office. Janus had thought he was getting fired or sent back to school for retraining. Instead, he became the plant's youngest quality assurance technician. Hey, Janus, one of the line managers said. Barry tell you about the sorter on line 3? I'm on it, Janus said cheerfully. 45 minutes later, the sorter on line 3 was back up and running, lenses polished and nozzles clear. Janus made a note to check the reject rate over the course of the next week to see if that fixed the problem, and he moved on. He liked his job. It was straightforward, and while the people on the plant floor had initially balked at his promotion, they'd mostly come around to Barry's point of view. Janus worked down his list of tasks by order of priority, taking the time each needed, knowing some of them would need to be pushed to tomorrow where they'd merge with and get sorted against the next day's task. Sometimes he only checked the readouts another time. He helped manually clear a shear blade jam on one of the balers because that line was shorthand. It didn't make up for where he came from, but while he didn't often get invited for drinks with his coworkers, they were almost always happy to see him down on the factory floor, and Janus felt as valued, trusted, and fulfilled as he thought he had right to be. By the time the middle of the shift rolled around, he was well past the morning's events, and even slightly ahead of schedule. He took a 30-minute break to inhale some noodles and document his tasks and observations. Then it was back to the factory floor for another 4 hours before the end of the shift. Janus was swapping out a micromotor on one of the robotic arms when Barry put a hand on his shoulder. Need to see you in the office. Okay, Janus said. He handed off the task to one of the younger mechanics, making a note for the evening shift QA to check the work before the arm went back into operation, then made his way to the plant manager's office. It was close to the end of main shift anyway. He could deal with whatever Barry needed, head home, and maybe see if Ryler wanted to come over and grab a beer and a hollow in the poor part of town. Have a seat, Barry said as Janus closed the door behind him. From the slumped shoulders and tired look on his boss's face, Janus knew this wasn't going to be good. What's up, Barry? I just got off the comm with station admin. You haven't been hitting your quotas. Janus felt a shock run up his spine. Is this about early shift? I told Meg your main shift quotas, Barry said. Some squint up an admin pulled up your maintenance tasks per hour and decided you were behind. Janus felt panic wrapping its hands around his throat. But the lines are all running at capacity. I know, Barry said. MP's pushing 87%. And we're taking extra capacity from the other plants, Janus said, his voice almost cracking. You showed me the numbers. I know what the numbers say, son, Barry said testily, and Janus sat back. Look, they've got it into their heads that we're a great team, and you're the weak link. I tried to explain that we are a great team, and you're a big part of that, but they only care about the tasks per hour. I'm sorry. Janus didn't know what to say. I think it's a timing thing, Barry said, looking down at his clasped hands. Some important wayfinder walked in from the dust with a bunch of beta station refugees. They need habs and jobs, and Dome admin is just shaking things up. So I'm fired because they want to shake things up. I didn't say you were fired, Janus, Barry said, meeting his eyes. It's my plant. They can't make me fire anyone. But there's a senior QA technician in the group that was assigned to this sector, and they are making me give him your job. A lot of things went through Janus's head right then. The pay dropped from QA tech to journeyman. Mechanic would make things tight around the hab, but he could still take care of Callie, even if he had to spend more nights at home. No more booze for his uncle. Maybe that would be a blessing. I'll make it work. Give me a couple months on the line to get my tasks per hour up. Give them the numbers they want, Janus, Barry said, shaking his head. What? Ani, I have to bust you to manual sorting. I'm sorry. It isn't fair, and I'm going to fight it. I just can't fight it right now. Hopelessness crushed the air out of Janus's lungs. It didn't matter to him that manual sorting was unskilled work for mech dropouts, or that it was dirty and dangerous. Janus always did what he had to. Hell, Ryler did it for fun sometimes when he was looking for new materials to process, or maybe it was a form of worship for him. It was hard to tell with the cult of the survivor, but manual sorting knocked him down an entire grade in the dome's allotment system. And that meant, "Go home, Janus," Barry said gently. Janus looked at Barry pleadingly. But there was only regret and finality in the other man's eyes. Callie was going to lose her scholarship. A note from the author, D. Bodden, Janus Invarian, studying materials science lore. What is a wristcom? The invention of the wristcom preceded interstellar flight by more than 300 years. Wristcoms are the primary way humans interface with the digital world and each other. They can store years of data and are able to form a variety of peer-to-peer networks. Most settlements maintain a persistent noosphere. The wristcom is a biochip inserted between the bones of a child's left forearm and controlled through gestures. The term can also describe a variety of connected devices, including neural interfaces and retinal implants. Retinal implants glow blue when in use as a safety feature. Wristcom implantation and noosphere access are considered a human right in most societies. As retinal implants have limited resolution, hand terminals, headsets, are still used. Chapter 3: Recycling. Planet 6. Prime Dome Planet. Irkalla, Survivor's Refuge, 4,402. G2.2210. Interstellar, the air was uncomfortably hot with Janus. The dome was still fully polarized and dark, so there was no shade to hide in. Only the inescapable, omnipresent heat made bearable by the dome ventilators circulating the dry air. Why? He checked the temperature through his wristcom. It was 32.5 degrees C, just a couple of degrees over where it should be, but it was funny how quickly things could go from uncomfortable to deadly when it came to living beings. Sector maintenance would probably be scrambling to fix the problem before it caused some sort of cascade. And that wasn't Janus's problem. If anything, he should be grateful. Barry had let him leave before the shift change, and between that and the oppressive heat, the alleys and transport lanes between the subterranean complexes that housed the dome's population were mostly empty. That meant no one would see him like this. He stopped and leaned against a wall with his eyes closed for a 10 count, letting his mask slip for these few precious seconds. He was unobserved to actually feel the pain he suffered every day. He wasn't angry, and he didn't cry about it. Uncle Yvonne's voice in the back of his head wouldn't let the weakness go that far. But he felt a deep, bone-numbing sadness about the end of a dream. What was he going to tell Callie? He took a few breaths to steady himself. Then he peeled off the top of his coveralls tying the arms around his waist, and found a bench to sit on and check his messages. There was a notification from sector admin about his grade change. Of course, they took forever to process a new work application or a permit request, but bad news always came fast. There was also a message from the admissions department at Callie's school. He gritted his teeth and read that one. Dear Mr. Invarian, we were notified of your change of status by Dome administration. As you know, participation in the Young Pioneer program is a privilege reserved for our most accomplished, hardest-working citizens and their families. And there is no question on our part, or that of Callie's teachers, that she belongs in this program. We are, however, obligated to follow Dome regulations in consultation with the superintendent of the General Skills Program in Sector 6. We have agreed it would be best for Callie if she transferred to her new class at the end of next week.